that leads into a question that I want to ask you. And certainly we've talked about it, but is there a quarterback controversy right now? Are you at a point now with the struggling offensive line where you would give at least the idea of Alex Padilla is mobile? If we can't protect Spencer, he's just a sitting duck. So maybe we give Alex an opportunity because he is mobile and perhaps he can make something happen with his feet when the pocket closes fast.
Well, it's funny you mention that because, honest to God, the quarterback at Western Illinois, I looked him up after the game because Western didn't do a great job of protecting him. But here's what he was able to do. First off, he's a really accomplished passer. He throws a really nice, tight football. And the rest of the story is he's got really good escapability. And when he does buy time escaping the pocket, he's not just pulling the ball down and running with it blindly down the field. He's looking for receivers that are working to get open. And they hit on any number of plays in that regard. So my point is I looked him up after the game, and I just wanted to congratulate him for how he played. And I don't know that he even had any idea who I was until I introduced myself. I said I used to be there are some pictures up on the wall in the locker room that I think for that reason they probably have an idea that I'm one of the old coaches because they have a picture up on the wall in the locker room. So I introduced myself to him, and I said, I want to congratulate you for how you played. And I just want you to know this. He is a senior. I said, I've coached college football 37 years, and I used to coach quarterbacks. And I'm here to tell you, somebody's going to bring you to camp. Talking about NFL. Somebody's going to bring you to an NFL camp, and you know what? You're good enough to make a team. That's the honest to God's truth. And I said, I'll tell you why. It's because you know how to spin the ball, and by that I mean throw with great accuracy and with good velocity. He's got a good, strong arm just like Spencer does. But frankly, his balls are more on target than Spencer's. Did I lose you? No, you're back. And the other thing, the big difference, of course, is that he has really good escapability. And, of course, the NFL, they don't want a guy that is destined to failure in the pocket either. They want a guy that can – it depends on who you are. Of course, Tom Brady, we know Tom Brady's not going to run for a lot of yards, and they're going to pay a premium to protect him. But there are other quarterbacks, of course, that are athletic and that can pull the ball down and still make something out of nothing. So, that's a quarterback for Western Illinois that was able to get that done. And I firmly believe he may make an NFL team. That's how good he is. The reason I bring it up, I could sit here wishing he could take snaps for us because I think he would be a really worthy competitor to Spencer. And in part because he'd have a different set of skills. He'd be a different type of quarterback. And I always did like the idea of the starter and the backup having different strengths and weaknesses because that makes you harder to prepare for, especially if you have already shown a tendency to play a second quarterback. So you have to spend time preparing for both of them and recognize that the calls on defense should be different to be able to defend the strengths and weaknesses of that individual quarterback.
Don, what did you see from Alex on that last drive? Obviously, it was a small sample size, but I can give you my opinion on what's going to happen as far as a choice at quarterback moving forward. My opinion is very simple. It's Spencer Petras because it just is, and that's not necessarily what I'm saying I want, but it will be Spencer Petras starting against Northwestern. But from what you saw, did Alex show enough during the game, during that fourth quarter, to where you possibly throw him in for a series and see what he can do this next week?
That's a tough one. Alex did get 2 possessions, as you recall. And what we don't know, because we're not that familiar with the Wisconsin roster, I'm pretty sure at that point in the game he was going against a few backups too. So I don't know that he saw the best Wisconsin defense, that the same one that Spencer saw throughout the game. But I will say this for Alex. To me, he looked decisive. He wasn't hesitant. And he did give up a couple of sacks, as I recall, 2, I believe. But obviously, we had some shaky performances by some pass protectors at that point. So it really wasn't on him. They were on him in a hurry. And at least he didn't cough the ball up, anything like that. But he did make some nice throws. as the game played out. And you could argue that that's still garbage time, but it counts for a little bit simply because at least this time he's on the field and he's going to do more than just hand the ball off, which is, of course, the bulk of the snaps he's ever had since he's been at Iowa. This time, of course, he had a green light to throw. He threw 6 passes. He completed 3. And the good reason that you could call that some kind of test is because Wisconsin certainly expected that he would throw. So they were in pass defense mode, whoever they had on the field. I think they had primarily starters still, but maybe they subbed here and there. I'm not sure. But the bottom line, he was put in a situation where he needed to throw, and they knew he needed to throw, and he still executed okay. 3 for 6 was not all bad. And I'm at least excited about the fact that he's got more game experience now. And I certainly don't think he'll start against Northwestern. You bring up a good point. Would there be anything wrong to insert him maybe for a random drive in the middle of the second quarter just to see what he could do? And again, get him some experience when the game's in doubt. That would be an option. I doubt that that'll happen, honestly. I think Spencer, in the eyes of the coaching staff, has won the job and hadn't done anything yet to lose it. And I know the fans might argue that point, but as you've heard me say before, if a quarterback struggles, part of that's on him, but part of that also relates to the other 10 guys. And that's certainly the case at Iowa.
Don, why are we throwing the ball away on 4th and 11?
I have no explanation for why we would do that.
That happened in the 4th quarter, and I kind of sounded off about it. I've come to Spencer's defense on many occasions, and certainly Spencer is not the only issue. He's probably not the biggest issue right now, but that was sort of a microcosm of some of my complaints with Spencer. His lack of understanding of time and place on the field, and lack of understanding of what down it is. We think back to the Iowa State game and repeatedly taking sacks in field goal range that push you out of field goal range. He's had this issue with throwing the ball away, on 3rd and long or especially 4th down to make any sense. But he did that on Saturday against Wisconsin. And I'm assuming he was throwing it away because it was 20 feet out of bounds.
And that was his last snap, wasn't it?
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. All I can think of course, does the field position matter at that point? We're already down 27-7. You could argue, and I remember vividly this happening in a game at Western Illinois. We were playing against Northern Iowa, and we were down on the 5-yard line. It was 4th and goal at the 5. We had an all Big Ten, an all-conference quarterback by the name of Russ Mickna. He did play in the NFL for a while, and he should have played a long time. That's another story. But anyway, here's my point. 4th and goal at the 5, and we needed to go for a touchdown. And so it was a movement pass, and Russ had to reverse his field. And now, as you can imagine, instead of being on the 10-yard line, he reverses his field. Now he's back on the 20-yard line. But this much I knew, and the same could be said for our running back, who was actually in the backfield. You could see it happen. Russ is going to buy a lot of time because he's a good athlete. He's running around. And then it occurs to our running back, I know what's going to happen. One way or the other, Russ Mickna is going to get the ball into the end zone. I don't care if he has to throw it over his head. He may not even have any idea where it's going, but he knows this. I'm not going to get tackled with the football because if I do, then we got to give the ball up anyway. Yep. So I'm going to find a way to put it in the end zone. That's exactly what happened. All of a sudden, you see our running back realize it's 4th down. Russ will not get tackled with the ball. He may do it under a lot of duress, but he's going to find a way to get the ball in the end zone. As Russ Mickna lets go of the ball, a Northern Iowa player is on one leg. He's still standing tall, a little bit like Stanley did in that Ohio State game. And sure enough, he throws the ball into the back of the end zone. And our running back, who had to sprint to get there because he realized he was actually in the backfield shortly before that point. So he had to sprint to get to the end zone to wait for that ball that was coming down because he knew Russ is not going to get tackled with the football because they both thoroughly understood football. And that's the point. They both understood what was going to happen. And Russ made it happen by buying time and throwing the ball under great duress, and Travis was waiting for it to come down. So fun to see. And taking that to yesterday's game, your point is we're already down 20. If you have to throw it up for grabs, just throw it up for grabs so that one of our guys might get it.
And Don, if it was intercepted, it would actually been better than turning the ball over at the line of scrimmage.
Right.
There is no circumstance in where that's a good idea to throw the ball out of bounds. No circumstances, Don.
It's hard to imagine. I don't think there was a penalty on that series of downs. Possible, maybe he was confused about the down. I wouldn't think so. I guess anything's possible. But your point is well taken. Maybe that had something to do with Padilla going in on the next series. But I do recall there was a shot on the bench of Coach Ferentz, Coach Kirk Ferentz, talking to Padilla, and he was talking about what he was going to be doing when he went on the field on that next series.
And for the record, Kirk Ferentz said after the game that the move to put Padilla in the game was simply to protect Spencer's health. So, because I thought that as well, Don. I thought it was a little bit early for Kirk to do that. And so I was a little bit disappointed. Now, maybe that's just coach speak, Don, him saying that it was to protect Spencer. But again, I agree with you. I think Spencer's the starter against Northwestern. But if you think back to how 2014 went with C.J. Beathard and Jake Rudock, I recall the game at Pittsburgh. And Don, I don't know if you remember that game specifically or if you were still coaching at the time. But
I was coaching.
That game, I recall Iowa coming out of halftime. I believe C.J. started the second half. And, of course, eventually he overtook Jake. I've always heard speculation that CJ was threatening to transfer, and that really, hurried the coaches along as far as making that change. But I just wonder if I don't see the harm in inserting Alex for a series. If he throws a pick, he throws a pick. I mean, it is what it is. But Don, I always go back to, was it Chuck Hartley that was not a great practice player and yet performed in the game? I mean, desperate times come for desperate measures, and I don't know how desperate the measure is. I mean, he's the second quarterback on the roster. Why not give him a shot for a series?
Well, I've told you the story, of course, as a head coach, reminding our assistants as we started the season, listen, you're the same person that didn't know for sure who the starter was 2 weeks ago, so do not be hesitant to put in the backup, because sometimes you find out that the backup is the better player. And there's that term gamer. Some players seem to play better than they practice. Others practice better than they play. I believe I'd rather take the guys that play well on Saturday. Those are the ones I really like a lot. I prefer that they practice well all the time, but Rob Howland's the guy that comes to mind. Rob Howland was a money kicker. I don't know if he ever missed a field goal that mattered. I do take that back. I think he missed one earlier in that infamous 1-versus-2 game, I think. But when the game was on the line, we had great confidence that Rob would make it. And he made it that day, and he made a bunch of other game-winning kicks, too, at the end because he was – but on Tuesday, he wasn't very good. I remember jokingly saying, I'm glad we don't play on Tuesday because Rob Howland would miss for sure. But he was really good on Saturday. It seemed like he always was aware the games were being played on Saturday, so that gave us a chance to have a really good kicker with a lot of confidence that he could perform under pressure.